Monday, October 28th, 2019.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have no prayer today?
Nope.
Do you want to let DJ, did you want to talk?
Sure, very quickly. Yeah, happy to come out today and sit in on the commission meeting and hopefully get to talk to everyone afterwards. And recently just appointed to the State and Local Government Committee at the State House, so looking forward to working with our local partners and the commissioners specifically, and happy to answer any questions that you guys have of me too. So.
Well, we'd like some more money from local government funds. Can you help us with that?
Take that into mind in the capital budget coming up in the spring. Are there any capital projects that the county has?
I think the only capital project that I've heard of is the Vermillion, trying to get the museum taken down over there in the lake. And I know you've been over there, and some of Gavarum's been over there looking at that project. But I haven't heard of any other major capital requests.
No, that's the only major one in Erie County that I'm aware of right now.
When are
So,
those due, DJ?
in the spring. So we actually just got the guidance on that on Friday. So all the paperwork that needs to be filled out, what's going to qualify as a capital budget line item, that type of thing. So that just came out Friday. So we're going to be circulating those around to everyone who's at least put a project on our radar. Vermillion's done a really good job of that. Oak Harbor, I know it's Ottawa County, but they have a project too that they already put on our radar. So there's a couple big projects in the works, and then Sandusky's going to have a request too, I believe, with a bike path project.
So is sewer repair eligible for that?
I don't know that it would be eligible for capital. It may. I'd have to check the criteria. It may also be eligible for H2 Ohio. That's also worth looking into, the H2 Ohio fund.
Okay.
Just depending on the nature of the project. I know there's a project on the west end by Ottawa and Lucas County. That's a sewer and water infrastructure project that is likely going to qualify for H2 Ohio funds. So I think that's worth looking into.
Because we are moments away from finding the results of, we're under both federal and state EPA findings and for our leaky sewers.
Right.
So we don't really know what project we have. That's why I asked on the time.
Yep.
Because our hopes and prayers are that we're going to find that big one somewhere, that one big line that's causing all the leaks. I don't know that that's going to be that way, or if it's going to be a series of smaller ones.
Yeah.
Probably more the case with some pumps and drains and stuff. But we've got a relatively big task ahead of us, and I think within the next month-ish, I think our studies should be in.
Sure.
That we would be able to see, and if there was something big, would we have time to submit that?
Yeah, I think so. Everything's got to be submitted. The capital budget's going to be approved, I would say, about March, April timeframe.
Okay.
So I think there's time. Soon, we want to get it sooner rather than later to see if that would qualify.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't rule it out if you're going to be getting the results in a month or so. You think probably early December is.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping.
fine.
Yeah, the meters are pulled, and they said they've got good data. It's just they're crunching the numbers right now and trying to find that, the golden ticket, as I call it.
It's
And
tough.
I don't know that it'll be there or not, but our suspicion is it's probably illegal flows into the system, is what everybody's thinking. But, who knows? Maybe we'll
Yeah.
find something big.
Well, depending on the nature of the problem, it could be capital budget related. It could be H2 Ohio, because we're trying to avoid runoff into the lake. So
Yeah, exactly.
there could be a couple buckets there that we could look into. So
All right.
glad we had that conversation.
Okay.
But, everything in Columbus is going pretty well right now. Myself, I'm working on a couple bills. Hopefully in the next couple weeks, we work on an apprenticeship bill with area high schools and 2-year community colleges, trying to get people skills to get into the workforce and get a job. So those are the primary issues that I'm looking at right now. So,
Okay. All right, thank you.
all right.
Thanks for coming out.
Yep, thanks for having me.
Ed?
It's kind of like getting our report card with the forecast here this morning. We start off with how much of a variance we had and how 2018 was predicted. So like 3 months, that's like a year ago when we were predicting how the year was going to end, and then, of course, the process has longer time frames. We
So-
rode up in the elevator with Mr. Daniel, and we said, somebody in the elevator has a pretty good idea what they're doing, year in, year out. And some of us haven't been around that long, but
Who would that be?
I think Pete pretty much has a good grasp on getting her done. I think he felt he could have done better, but
So
I
explain
think
this.
if you look at it from a grade standpoint, I think anyone that can get around a 98% accurate, 97% accurate, I think that's a pretty solid A for most teachers that I've ever met, so.
So explain that, how that works. So, for purposes of this, so 2018, the actual was 30,389,000 in revenue.
Correct.
And
So like a year
explain, what does
ago-
that mean?
I'm sorry?
What is that, 3 months in 2000?
So a year ago, about this time, when we were predicting how we were going to end 2018, we were thinking it was going to be 30,195,000.
Okay.
So we did a little better.
And then, so, and in 2017, 15 months ago,
We were predicting what 18 was going to be. That was our guess at that time.
29.88 million. Say the numbers just for the record, so,
29,880,860.
okay.
And then a year earlier, we were predicting 29,732,568. And way back in 2015, we thought it was going to be 29,644,639.
It's quite a bit off there.
Yeah, we slack off. We acknowledge that the further, when you're taking a shot that far out, it's kind of hard to be 99.9, but
Yeah, I suppose.
I
Again,
think
yeah.
97.5 is pretty darn good. So,
What do you guys think?
And that was on the low side, so it makes it conservative,
Keeper.
which makes it good. You know, again, the whole idea of going through this exercise to
Wish the
say
state could do this.
whether the forecast is fairly accurate or is it something that's just pie in the sky. And what this says is it's fairly accurate. That's the process that we go through
Yeah.
to come up with the numbers. I mean, that's really the point of this. But I mean, if you look at what we've said in 15 and 16, we'd have a higher fund balance. So in that regard, no, maybe we didn't do that good.
Well, but the variable there is what did you spend the money on?
Mm-hmm.
You know, did we do capital projects? Did we do things that, you know, we didn't know about at the time?
Yeah, so the expense side was pretty
Pretty
good.
good.
Pretty good,
Yeah.
yeah.
Considering the storms that we battled throughout those years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are confident that our numbers are probably pretty close going forward, so let's look at the forecast and see where we're headed.
the page immediately following is for Erin, so that she can double check to make sure we're accurate. She's a real numbers person herself.
Yeah, those next couple pages give you the detail. I mean, I think that the next page is is the biggest thing. It's just the assumptions that we put into this report. And again, the big thing here is any of the sunset sales tax transactions and the lodging tax transactions for the sports complex, they are not included in these numbers, okay? We just look at those as separate items. But just by the nature of it, we had to put them in the general fund. See, on the revenues, a little bit of a change this year. Again, we're not looking at anything too crazy going on as far as economic expansion. It's just considered, relatively slow to moderate, but with a slight downturn in investment rates. So our investment income, we have that is actually going down for the next year, slowly building it back up a little bit, but it doesn't get much more than what we're at today. Sales tax has got a minimal increase with the current inclusion of the state budget. That included out-of-state internet retailers, including getting that piece in there. So for 2020, bump that number up a little bit. Not a lot, but a little bit.
Because your prediction is the state will,
Well, because the state, they already made the change that we're gonna tax out-of-state internet retailers.
that's done.
Yeah, that's done. So you're really only gonna see a bump really with 1 year primarily. From then on, it's already included, so. A new thing is the Nexus Pipeline Property Tax Edition in 2020. But there's a pretty serious depreciation factor in there. And what we were recommended to do is take most of that money and set aside in capital reserves. So we did that. I will tell you that the number is much lower than what was first previously publicly announced by the pipeline company.
Was 800,000.
It was 800 and some thousand,
300.
but yeah, now it's 300 and some thousand, and the reason being is when they initially did that, they included what was just called the county tax levies, which is, a combination of the general fund and a DD, Metro Parks, and serving our seniors, which again, general fund only gets one piece of this, so.
But in totality, was it $800,000? Do you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, was it like 847 or something like that?
In schools?
No, just for what's shown as a county tax levy.
The school's got their piece.
Schools got their own number,
Piece in
Yeah.
addition?
yeah.
So of the 830,000, that's a lot of money that got spread between DD, is that Health Department?
No, wasn't the health department.
Just
But they will get some money. in
not part of the
Soul
800,000?
mental health,
Not part of the 800?
but no, it was
So
part of it, no.
who's taken the majority of the 800 then?
Oh, really, the majority is DD,
Really?
yeah. Yeah, they got 3 mil continuous.
Huh.
Our inside millage is 2.3.
Wow.
That's a bigger number,
Yeah.
yeah. Yep. Again, we're still collecting back on the Meadows advances, but at a pretty small amount. Our health insurance, we did an advance to that several years ago, showing the final repayment next year. Increased state reimbursement for indigent legal defense covers the 2-year state budget only. Again, after that's over, we don't know where it's gonna go. So what we did was just put it right back to where it has been.
How much more money are we getting this year?
This year, we probably won't see hardly anything. It'll be in the next 2 years and we'll see something.
How much?
I think at its high point, maybe about 300,000. I know when they initially passed it, they said we're gonna get, up to 100%. I don't see that happening. Obviously, the State Public Defender's Office don't see that happening. What I expect to happen is that a lot of county public defenders, where they have them, will ask for more monies, and it'll be given, and it'll suck that down even quicker. And we'll realize a net rate of probably, I'm thinking at the end of it, maybe 70%.
And we're getting currently?
around 42 to 45. So I don't see that much, I mean, it does affect it, you know, the numbers do go up, but again, what we did was we said, okay, after that, you know, we equated it to a full year for next year, and then the next year just a partial year, because the state budget will be over by then. So that's, you know, we did I'll kind of jump down into the expense side. We did a very similar thing with what the state did for children's services. They increased their funding, but we also have to, it also says that we have to keep up what we've been spending in the general fund on that. But what I did there was just put that number in for those 2 years, and afterwards back to where we think children's services, what we're responsible for, comes back to a normalized level, just as it would be right now without that state funding piece.
Right.
So,
Because that's $600,000 or something like that?
well, you know, be honest with you, I don't know what the number is that they're gonna get additionally. I just know what, the piece where they said, okay, general fund, you can't reduce your part. So,
So you moved it to 1 million?
1.1 for this year,
1.1, yeah.
and which will affect the 2021 calculation.
Right.
So 20 is back up to kind of where we have been. It was an average of 4 years.
Yeah.
And an average, a rolling average for the next 4 years.
So going back to this public defender, so it's about 300,000, none this year, about 300 next year?
I figure we may see a little bit of it this year, maybe less than 100.
Oh, so there is some this year?
There'll be some this year. They said it was supposed to take effect in October. There was a 90-day lag, the state budget, and when that takes effect.
So then next year it's 300,000?
Yeah, then next year probably around less than
200.
two, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yep. Just as far as the expenses and how we put this together, you know, we don't do it in detail, going down by line item, we don't do that. Another part of it is in future years, so 20 through 22, we don't put in any specific capital allocation in any department, we just use one big number for everything. Okay? Pay increases there are not specified, but they are included in 2020 and thereafter. Again, we're just assuming there's gonna be some kind of pay increases. We know where we're at with health insurance, that we're holding for 2020, but thereafter, we expect them to go up. We put in about 10% a year thereafter. Another big part is the staffing is at today's level going forward. So we didn't look at, this person, you know, this department's gonna get additional people or lose people or anything like that. It's just whatever today's staffing is. And other expenses are just, you know, they're included with just a minimal of in growth. Cost of one murder trial per year is included. Again, that's just kind of a regular murder trial, not a capital. Capital is probably
100.
double, if not triple, the cost of a regular murder trial.
So this is only 60?
Yeah, 60,000. Again, I already covered the child custody. Already talked about how we do the capital allocation. Debt reserve fund transfers included in 19. There's no operating contingency, and the amount for compensated absences includes an annual accrual and the restart funding for an extra pay period. Again, I haven't even calculated what that is or when we do that, but we did bump the number up to, it's 80,000 is what it is. Is what we still should be setting aside there annually. Okay. And then I really, the big part there at the bottom is conclusions. Over the forecast period, you know, our general fund meets the definition of structural balance, which means that we're not spending any more than we're bringing in. However, the latter years do not indicate that, including a diminishing trend. Well, and what that means, I'll just kind of tell you, if you go back to last year's projection, we had us going from, the last couple of years, a small surplus to a small deficit, and essentially, 2021 looks a little bit better than the previous year's forecast, but 2022, it does show still a deficit, even though it's kind of small. The previous year was about 100 grand, this year it's about 50 grand, but the next year it's like 465,000 is the deficit. So it shows it's increasing, that deficit.
Go back to that graph.
And then, yeah, the next part is a graph.
That's an interesting graph.
Yeah, it is.
First of all, it shows you the value of money over time, which is interesting. And it also shows you that between 98 and 2004, there was more spending than revenue.
Yep.
And then it looks like in 2008, 2007, 2008, it got bad again.
Mm-hmm.
2009, it dipped way below. Big drop. And
Yep.
then basically it stayed level all along.
Well, yeah, I mean, we had, obviously, 2008, yeah, we spent a lot of money. We had about almost $3 million fund deficit. And then the recession hit, we flattened it out, and then since then, we've just been slowly kind of building it back up until, you can see, then it starts dipping like the forecast says at the end here.
Yeah.
So basically, they didn't want to make any tough decisions in 2008. So they just said, we'll reach into the bank, pull out a bunch of money to plug the deficit, and then the next year we'll deal with it.
Looks like $2.6 million in 2008 got pulled out of the piggy bank.
Yep,
Just to fund operations,
yeah,
which is why we're trying to preach that we have some money in the bank in case we encounter this situation again, which there will be a downturn in the economy at some point,
right.
which is our whole theory all along, that we don't have to make these huge cuts, we'll be able to sustain. The interesting point to me is that from 1838, when Erie County was founded, I think, to 1986, the year after I was born, the county was spending about less than $10 million. And in my 33 years of life, we've got up to spending $33 million.
Mhm.
That's $1 million per year I've been alive.
So they say money doubles every 10 years in a normal economy, or is it 14 years? Depends on what the interest rate is.
Yeah, and inflation and everything, I mean,
Let's see what that does. So in 88 to 98, it went from 10 million to 17 million, so not quite. So yeah, it's 14 years would be 86 to 2000. Man, that's just about perfect. 21 million to 10 million in 14 years. And then if you go from 2000 to 14, there it didn't, because the economy was going the wrong way, right?
yeah, you had two spots in there with two big, economic downturns within that period.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that shows where the money didn't go.
Right.
Then the economy takes off in 2000, or recovers, I should say, in 2009 to 2022. And that goes from 25 million to 32 million, still not bad. The big part was right in here, the run-up, 86 to 2000. That's where all the money got accelerated.
Well, because there was a sales tax put on.
That is right. First sales tax went on then.
And they spent it.
Mm-hmm.
Quite commensurately.
And how do you put the toothpaste back in the tube now?
Mm-hmm.
You cut the sales tax.
That's one way to do it.
One way. It was one way.
So this is like the long-term report card.
Yeah,
It's not
We
looking
can do it
good.
that way.
Remember, when Ed Widman started, all the county employees were in the courthouse.
Yeah.
There was a few on Sycamore Lawn.
A couple. Just saying.
That's a good graph.
It's
Interesting.
interesting too, how the ending balance matches only, I mean, throughout the whole thing except in one section. If you look at the blue line's the ending balance, the fund balance, okay? And how it mirrors it, except in one section it's going completely opposite way and then now it's back to mirroring.
Which was in 2008.
Yeah.
It's when they pocketed the money. Election year.
it's when you first ran, right?
Yes, it was. So let's get to this next sheet. This is a good sheet too, that, you know, I've been preaching now for a couple of years that, did you cook a recession into this? Into your number?
Not necessarily a recession, but certainly a slowdown, and there's just no real substantive growth in here. I do not use the sales tax, or, you know, where we have seen it go up by, you know, crooked numbers.
Yeah,
And
in years past.
Yeah, in years past, and
But
just
now-
not doing that
Uh-uh.
anymore. You know, it would not be unusual to see I mean, it would pretty normal to see a 3-4%.
Right.
You know, everything here is pretty much under 2.
So, but with this state thing, with DJ here, is that tax thing, now, if I buy something from a single store operator in Texas, so now I'm gonna pay the sales tax? Is that the
Assuming they
new
make
law?
Over $100,000.
Huh?
Assuming they have over 100,000 in receipts, right?
I'm not sure what the cutoff was. As long as they don't have a physical presence in Ohio.
That's what because what we used to do is you could buy from that guy in Texas if he didn't have a presence in Ohio, and you'd save your sales tax
Mhm.
from Amazon or whatever. Now that's not the case, right? So now I'm gonna, that's gotta be huge, isn't it?
You would think it would,
I would think it would be.
but
They're not-
whatever the
They're not predicting it's that much. Statewide,
Right, they
they're
didn't.
saying like $50 million statewide.
statewide, right,
Statewide.
yeah.
Isn't the cost of collection too kind of a challenge? Because, you know, the bed tax they're eliminating, there used to be like you had to have so many beds before you had to participate, kicking that out. You're going after all these smaller sales. I mean, I don't think everybody's just gonna say, oh, sure, where do you want me to send my money? Excuse me.
The enforcement is the problem.
I think too, the dollar amount of the purchase, like when I'm buying something off of Amazon, I'm not spending $2,000-$3,000, I'm spending $30.
Right.
You know, so when you scale that back, I mean, nobody's buying a car on Amazon, you know, or big ticket items. So I think that's why you're not seeing as much either.
But you would think in totality,
Mhm.
if I can get my groceries now delivered to my house, you know, that's what they say is gonna happen in the future. Walmart's gonna bring my groceries to my house. It's like,
You
what's
can buy
that
a
about?
car online.
Huh?
You can buy a car.
Maybe we'll
online.
buy a car online.
Well, I think the part that doesn't really square is we've watched the stock market go up this much. The sales taxes only went up a little bit, and our assumption was always, well, it's because everybody's buying everything online.
Yeah.
And now the state's saying, no, not really. Your assumption was wrong. And that's where I'm scratching my head. But
Mhm.
we'll see how accurate the Department of Taxation is.
Right.
Well, the big question mark, I think, that's on everybody's minds right now is 2021, for an argument. If, you know, something bad happens and we do go into this long-awaited recession, you know, what you're saying is you didn't put doomsday in here, you put a slowdown.
Right.
There's a difference.
Yep.
What we're trying to say is that you know, everybody needs to plan, I think, for the worst. You know, I'm a pessimist by nature, and I think we need to have that savings in place, that if something bad happens, you know, we still have our obligations, we still have to meet payroll. I'd rather have that cushion. And I know, I know Pete and I, we've talked about this through the years, is that, you know, what is the reserve that we really need? You know, we always felt, you know, we were being extremely optimistic.
Yeah.
in 60 days, and that, to me, is, nobody would run their business on a 60-day
Right.
cash. I mean, I wouldn't. That's crazy talk. So, yeah, I think that's, I mean, it shows we're good, but it looks like we're starting to lose money.
Yep. And yeah, we did change that minimum reserve need. I mean, I went and looked at GFOA, and they basically said, you know, 2 months is the extreme minimum. That, you don't go any lower than that, but you need to adjust for your locality's situation. You need to take a look at, you know, what kind of other, well, for one thing, we've always said is your timing of your revenue cycles. You know, if you get a monthly collection, or if you're on a property tax collection, you get it twice a year, so you need to build it up for quite a bit. I'll take an example like the dog pound. They only collect their revenues pretty much just once during the year. So they need to keep their fund balance up high. Well, in general fund is a combination of different things. It's quarterlies, it's semi-annualies, and it's monthlies. So for that reason, it probably should be higher than that. For another reason is internal risks from other funds. Just as an example, our general fund is roughly only 25% of our total budget. So you got 75% of our other funds could influence what we do in the general fund. If they all go belly up, then we'd be responsible for the rest.
Which we've seen, and they're not.
Not to extreme measures, but that's why it's important with our budget
Health Insurance Trust,
that you look at every single thing.
you've seen the Meadows.
Yeah,
Children's,
Right.
children's services.
right,
You know, we had to
Oh.
pony up a ton of money
right,
for children's services because of the opioid crisis.
exactly. So there's another factor, that's kind of, and that's just internally, even though some external factors factor into that, but still. And then just other external risks, regular economic conditions. And again, we've got exposure to state funding changes, which, you know, just kind of pointed some of these out here. Just in a few other examples, like local government funds. One point, we were getting over $2 million a year. Now we're just slightly over $1 million.
Right. Well, and I think, you know, I think it's to be said for DJ and the new group of folks that came in there, the current governor, you know, we're elated with, you know, public defender money. We got the children's services money. That's huge, you know, for us. But what you giveth, you also taketh away, and, you know, you're a creature of your own economy also. And, you know, the problem is when you give us this influx of money, we gotta be careful that in 2 years, if that's your budget cycle, maybe there's a new group that comes in there that says no. And of course, we've already spent it, like, problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's not conducive to increasing your day-to-day operational costs. It's just not. So you have to be very careful with that. So for that reason, I mean, we bumped up that what we consider a minimum reserve up a higher number. And if you go according to this, we never meet it. We get close here in 2021, but we're still below where we should be.
That was the real number that I was going to bring up, that even next year, projecting a revenue bump of 3.4%.
Right.
Expenses of just 2.5%, so you're getting a surplus there. Even with those numbers for next year, you still have your reserve fund at a little over 10 million, but that's not meeting that basically
Well,
33% of that.
That would be the
revenue.
target of 120 is the
Well,
10
yeah,
million.
9 million is the balance.
right.
The target's 10.3, so we're still 1.2 million.
Right,
below the best guess to have that reserve fund,
That
the
level.
balance that we would feel comfortable with.
Right.
And that's with a strong 2020, and those are the numbers, again, tied to the state budget. And moving forward, the revenue numbers are not going to be that high.
Right. Again, we get a little bump again with that nexus, but again, I factored most of that out as a reserve as part of the expenses. So, you see a similar jump with the expenses because of that. It's not a real big number, but it still moves it up, moves the needle a little bit.
All right.
And that's why you see 21 where the revenues actually drop. Because again, you've already factored some, really, what I say it as one-time expenditures, and then they kind of, or revenues, and they kind of go away, or flatten out.
Yeah. Well, my fear is, a changing economy.
Well, we've been hearing a lot about that in the media.
You sure have. You got a big election coming up, and, that could really throw a monkey wrench into the whole scheme of things.
Sure. When people get apprehensive, that's when they hold on to their money.
Yeah.
And that's part of what you'll see in a recession.
Well, let's continue to be good stewards of taxpayers' money, as I think your graph shows, and hold on.
So, yeah, again, this is our kind of our first thing we look at, and then we'll move on to, basically based on what this says, our budget policies and what we head into for next year.
When will the budget policies be presented?
Probably within a couple of weeks, the latest. We're gonna have our first policy meeting this month, or this week.
Good, and that'll be communicated to the other elected officials and department heads and us.
Yeah,
So we don't make the mistakes that we did last time when we changed the budget policy. We procedurally made a mistake. We should have had the budget policy set, ready to go. We changed them on day one after you guys had done 10 meetings or more with elected officials fixing their budgets, and then we said, oh, by the way, we're redoing it. So, we want to make sure we all make the right decision this time, so we don't go through the headache that we went through last time. So I appreciate you guys working on this and getting it to us. We'll hopefully have a little smoother January through March. So thank you, guys.
We may want to replace the microphone before that. May get worn out.
Hopefully not.
Okay, we have some resolutions.
before you do that, I just want to bring up one thing that's in there. I think you guys know it's coming, but we drafted a resolution on the LMN Development TIF, otherwise known as Kalahari Resorts. We've collected enough money there, we don't have to collect any additional funds for tax year 2019 to collect in 2020. So we're going to ask the county auditor to forego collecting that to the part that's siphoned off the regular collection that goes towards the TIF, because we've got all the money we need.
But the tax still gets paid.
The tax in total will still be paid, it's just that half it was shifted over to this tax equivalency fund, and now we won't have to do that, so.
That's gonna help Perkins and Huron schools.
Yes, well, I mean, right now, and we've got, and finance already put it together, and we've been doing this for quite a few years, I want to say since probably around 2010. We've been noticing, yeah, there was excess money in there, and we've been distributing a piece of that. We've been doing that every year. It's not the full other 50%, but it's a fairly good chunk of it, so people will still see a little bump in their tax collections for those that TIF affected.
Pete, could you explain just really quickly for folks the idea behind the TIF and what that does and why
Again,
it was first enacted?
Okay, be honest with you, it wasn't our first one, which actually didn't go very well, but we certainly learned from it. But a TIF is where a developer will come in and if he's got some improvements to we've got some public improvements that could be included with this project, such as drainage, water lines, sewer lines, public roads. We could go ahead and essentially change the tax collection allocation from, instead of it being normal and 100% of it going out to all the political subdivisions that affects, so we can redirect part of that over towards like paying a bond to pay for those public improvements over a period of time. And that's essentially what a tax increment financing is, because there's going to be an improvement to the tax base that will increase tax collections, and we'll take a part of that increase and put it over towards the finance and public improvements to help that development move along.
And it's specific to developments, and that's what
It
we've
is,
done as a
it's
county to
specific to
different.
development, right. There's going to be some improvement to, to existing property value. Okay.
But let me add, if I may, is our new sort of rule of thumb is that we don't allow TIFs unless there's 100% guaranteed funding behind that amount. In the old days, and we'll go back to, what's the one out on 101?
Quarry
Quarry
Lakes.
Lakes. The county forked over the money to build all the roads, got no percentage of the lot sales, and we're still paying was it 120 or 180,000 a year out of our general fund dollars.
Well, this year was a lot more because you had one of those property owners try to get exemption, which he didn't, which actually helps us next year. We won't owe anything next year out of the general
Because,
fund.
yeah, I know, of the
And
hospital.
then when it changes back to normalizing, it's about 70 to 80,000.
But it used to be 120, wasn't it?
That, at a high point, it was between 100, 120, yeah.
So, and we had to pay the bill for that.
Right.
So now what we do is, even going back to Menards, is we make them put up cash equivalent or basically the money to guarantee our loan, so
Well,
that doesn't happen.
What I think was the big problem with these things was that, the developer would come in and say, oh, yeah, my value's gonna go up to this, so, and that's what you based your kind of your TIF payments and the debt on that. And to combat that over aggressiveness with their valuation is to take their number and scale it way back from whatever they said, take it back 70, 80% and work off of that kind of number. And that gives you a much better idea, because that's usually what would happen is they say this, but when it gets done, it's something much less. And that's
Right.
just something we learned, that, you just can't take their numbers at face value. You got to be conservative and discount it. And then you think you're probably in fairly good shape. But even at that point, if they stop paying their taxes,
Yeah, you're out of luck.
you're still out of luck. So, I mean, even the best scenario is for that developer.
Always stands.
Well, luckily, we didn't
Do the
finance.
we didn't do the project.
We didn't do the financing because it wasn't all there according to the service agreement. But like we did with Kroger, the last one is partially in LMN as well. I mean, not LMN, but or Lakecrest or Menards, if you will. We had that developer buy the bond
Right.
and say that, hey, well, whatever we collect, that's what you get, but no more. So nothing's collected, you don't get anything either. Those probably the two best safeguards you can do is, so in other words, discount the investment. Number two,
Yep.
make the purchaser buy the bond, and basically have them kind of self-finance it.
Yep.
Yep.
Pete, I have a couple questions. But
Yeah.
One is for DJ. DJ, when you go to Columbus and you stay overnight because of your job, is that reimbursed?
You have to be there for either voting session or committee, and it's reimbursed and capped at $65.
So you can spend $65 a night. That includes meals, lodging.
Yeah, and you get one round-trip mileage reimbursement from your house per week.
So if you have to be down there 2 different times, the second trip's on you.
Yeah.
How's that sound for your state legislators? Just so you know, if you work for Erie County, it's essentially unlimited. We're dropping probably, I don't know, $2,000 on hotels.
They haven't found a hotel like the German Village Inn yet, have
German
they?
Village Inn, that's good enough for the legislature.
There's a Days Inn by the German Village. It's-
That one's a little more risky, I think.
I've stayed there.
Oh, have you?
I have. Yeah,
Recently?
yeah, recently. It's right next to Ben's house.
And it- and
Okay.
actually,
Because I can't afford those, these expensive hotels, on commissioner's salary, so I stay at Days Inn.
the,
I'm good with that.
the overnight reimbursement was only recently implemented. So when
Within the last
Representative
year.
Arndt was
Yeah,
serving,
6 months ago.
there was no overnight reimbursement. So like, people were rooming together at the German Village Inn so they could try to.
Now, I'm assuming your staff would get the same privileges. They would get the hotel, the meal, the reimbursement on the mileage. If you took, you probably have, a staff of 6 or 7,
One.
8 people?
There's 2 of us total covering 115,000 people, and then as far as the staff goes, they can't come up here I cannot make them come up here for any campaign-related purposes.
No, no.
But if they do come up here for the job, they have to take one of the state vehicles. So I don't think there's any reimbursement to them, but they have to take the state vehicle up here to the district,
Do they ever stay overnight
not usually.
so they can drive back to Columbus? Because it's like, 12 hours back to Columbus, I think?
Gotta send them out of here at 3 o'clock. So,
I think the biggest complaint that we've experienced in a lot of departments is that, the boss goes, but then he takes a lot of people with him. And, I think Matt's always said, shouldn't they be there working, doing what they're supposed to be doing for Erie County citizens instead of, going down to quote-unquote get smarter? And I think as far as getting smarter, when you're going to a seminar, a lecture, or whatever, most of that stuff's available online too. And I know, Gary, you have to go for continuing education, but you try and go to a continuing education that's in Cleveland or Toledo, and, so you can come home that night and be with your lovely wife.
Actually, we do ours from our office, we do the one that's almost always in Sandusky in the summer. So
Yeah.
not any travel expense related to that, the other one is in Columbus.
I mean, I like Columbus. It's a fun town.
You ever driven around in Columbus?
Terrible. I didn't say I want to live there.
So, thank you for just interesting what state representatives get.
It's a glamorous life we live.
It is.
So there's a job description for social service interventionalist specialist 3. What is this for?
That's just for from the posting that went through last week's meeting.
Just, okay.
Yeah.
And then we have a letter from the Mental Health and Recovery Board we ask your support by voting for the Mental Health and Recovery Renewal Levy on November 5th. And I think, and as I look at this, I consider it campaign material, but it has no disclaimer, no paid for by. This is something that I think you've looked into a little bit, that the mental
did.
health, and DJ, this is mostly for you, the mental health levy tax dollars can be used to promote advocating for a ballot issue.
Really?
And it seems to be an
Yeah.
exemption just for mental health, I don't think anybody else can do it, but.
No, nobody else can do
It
it.
seems interesting to me that we're using taxpayer dollars to promote a levy, where every other organization would make a Friends of Metro Parks and they would raise the money.
The schools have to do the same thing.
Friends, yeah.
Oh, do you know that that's a fact? Because all I thought that there was a quote-unquote legal opinion. I didn't know that
Right,
there
several
was.
legal opinions. Be honest with you, I mean, I read the code. The language in there is ambiguous at best. It's not straightforward. It doesn't come out and say, yeah, you can spend money on your levy campaigns. It doesn't do that.
Well,
But
my-
people have interpreted it as such.
Yeah,
that you
but
can't.
here's the problem. Let's say Erin here is against the levy. She's a taxpayer. Why should her money be being used to support something that she's not for? This is America.
Mhm.
Nobody else can do this. Why can they do it?
That might be something that peers are not aware of. But yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I don't think you should be able to use taxpayer money to advocate for or against ballot issues or candidates.
Is that something that you could look into?
Sure.
We'll give you a homework here.
Yeah,
Because that doesn't sound right to me.
could be an exemption in the code.
Okay.
I don't have Gary Lickfeld's mind where I could just pop that thing right out my brain, what that was, but,
Gary, back in 1942, what happened on that?
Vapor mill hell, or drug addict.
yeah, well, it's been out there a long time because how Attorney General opinions, say the earlier one was in the 80s or something like that, and there was another one like in the 90s, early 2000s, something like that. And it's, like I said, it's not straightforward in the code the way it's written, that says, yeah, you can do that. To me, it's somebody's gotta massage that and put it into an opinion to say that.
And if it's good for one, why isn't it good for the school districts and everybody else who would love to
Sure,
not have to?
right.
Let's make it for
I
political.
mean, I understand mental health's important, but so is, physical health. I mean,
DD.
schools, BDD, I mean, they're all
Health
important. Yeah, right. They're all important.
Natural
I'm not
products.
so sure one's more so than the other. Sure, actually, there are probably other things that may even be more important. Like if you had a law enforcement levy on,
You know?
might even be even more important. I don't know.
So now would you like to do the,
Resolutions. Move for adoption of resolution of Board of Commissioners for the purpose of authorizing the county auditor to end the exemption of real property taxes on all parcels currently being allocated to the tax increment financing service agreement with LMN Development LLC, that's Kalahari Resorts.
Second,
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr. Old?
yes.
Mr. Shenigo?
yes.
Move for adoption of resolution of Board of Commissioners authorizing the county auditor to make a supplemental appropriation.
Second,
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr. Old?
yes.
Mr. Shenigo?
Is that it? Okay, another note, just we have one closed session here on personnel, we're gonna postpone that.
All right, so
Do we need,
I'll make a motion that we go into executive session regarding pending litigation, or regarding litigation with Gerhard Gross.
second?
Mr. Old?
Yes.
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr. Shenigo?
Yes.
Come out of executive session.
Second?
Mr. Old?
Yes.
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr.
Make a
Shenigo?
motion, we adjourn.
Second?
Mr. Old?
Yes.
Mr. Schaffner?
Yes.
Mr. Shenigo?
Yes.